Let's talk a little bit about developing a thesis and kind of coming into this focused idea about our topic. So, we've been doing a lot of work with note taking, we've been doing a lot of work with researching, and we started with this inquiry question, maybe something like, how are lawnmowers and the environment connected? Or, what maybe you could start with some simpler questions of perhaps saying something like, what is the impact of lawnscaping on our environment, right? Something like that. But through our notes and throughout this whole next step, we will have focused this idea, hopefully. And so I want to talk about developing a thesis statement, which is really the answer to your question. So here we have developing a thesis statement. And for most academic essays, a thesis is expected, it's required, it's what you want to say, it's your point, it's your soft, say one freaking thing in your essay, as Bruce Ballinger says. And it's really to express the purpose or the main idea of your essay. Additionally, it might include some significance to your opinion on the topic. And for our essay, that's absolutely true. Because you've chosen a topic that hopefully you are passionate about or interested in or might impact your life in some way, shape, or form, we want to have kind of that opinion and that personal experience in it. Just like the student example about maybe thinking about freezing your eggs that the student wrote, or even in the bidet one where she's had this experience with it and she's looking to see what others are thinking and why isn't it incorporated into our American culture. So here, there's some important points to consider. It's usually placed at the end of the introduction, but as we've seen from our mentor text, oftentimes it's not. It can be, absolutely, but sometimes it's a couple paragraphs in. It's often expressed in really one sentence, and that is really just for clarity's sake. Sometimes it's two, but very rarely is it longer than that. That means when students have like longer theses like that, I think it means that they're kind of trying to do too much in the essay. You also need to determine whether your assignment is objective, subjective. Ours is subjective. I am asking you to bring in different types of evidence. This isn't a purely research essay where you're just regurgitating information you found on the internet. For this, you are really talking about your experiences, your observations, and how they intersect with the research that you've done. So here for subjective requires the essay writer to make a claim or assertion about a topic, right, which is supported through an organized presentation of evidence, samples, and analysis. Oops, sorry about that. So what words in your assignment show to be subjective? Well, this is me telling you it's going to be subjective. I also really like that they have this house here because you want to think about your thesis statement being held up by all of these. They have body paragraphs, but I would really say all of your different types of evidence that we've discussed. That can be both kind of anecdotal evidence and also peer-reviewed research, also TED Talks, also podcasts. We want all of those cylinders to be working in this essay so it all comes together. And then when it does come together, it's your conclusion, right? The foundation, how it grounds everything, how everything is connected for your reader at the end. There's some other points to consider. A thesis statement for an academic is more than just a statement. You can't say something like smoking is bad. Well, smoking is bad. Like, we know that. So it has to be a little bit more than that. Maybe you want to talk about the way that smoking is marketed towards teenagers or kids, right? Maybe you want to look at different aspects of vaping versus smoking. And so these are the ideas that you want to explore. You also want to think about what's not effective. And so they have some many things like there are many forms of American jazz. Well, there are, but you want to be a little bit more specific. So I like these examples that they have here where it has kind of the type of example. And this is what we're really doing here, this expository or analytical essay, where we're asking you to really synthesize information and do an analysis and say, how does this really come together? So we're going to look at this and we're going to look at the research ones because ours kind of hit both, right? Main point includes an assertion, supporting points. Yeah. So we're looking at, again, the subjective. So you might say something like, since jazz is an original American art form, its unique musical elements are more accurately described in terms of its historical, sociological development. So I know kind of that's where you're going with it, right? You're going to be explaining this. But in the research paper, right, here we have kind of a bit more with outside evidence. So although some researchers have concluded that genetic factors are primarily to blame for the disease of alcoholism, there's much stronger evidence that to the contrary that proves the environmental factors are more likely the cause. So this is a bit more argumentative, but it's also looking at the other information that's out there that you'll be pulling into your essay. So either of those could work depending on what you're doing. And I think that most likely you'll probably come into something that is a little bit in between the two. All right, on this part, it's going to ask you to kind of fill out a little bit about your topic. And I'm going to encourage you to do this. So you've done your note taking, you've done all of this, and you might have come to a realization about your topic, which is really your thesis and answer to your question. So you want to think about, okay, what's my topic? How do I want to focus it a bit? Because you have research that's all over the place, and we want to make sure that the essay is focused on one specific portion of that. So then you write kind of a general thesis, right? The death penalty should be abolished. But the specific thesis, we're going to think about, how am I going to set up my essay? What's that going to look like? And so the death penalty should be abolished because it's fundamentally immoral and ineffective for preventing crime and sometimes mistakenly enforces innocent people. So we can see those are 3 topics that you're going to discuss in the essay. Now, your essay may not have 3 topics. We looked at the bidet and it really had 2 and a lot of background information in it, right? And so you're going to want to be thoughtful. And I wouldn't say you would have to have 2 or 3, perhaps you could have 4, but you want to think about really keeping it focused because this essay isn't as long as you would think it was. Here we go. For 6 to 10 pages, which is more what we're writing, you can see that thesis might be a little more nuanced because you have more ideas to develop it. Oh, sorry about that. So what you're going to want to do is go ahead and fill this portion out for yourself and think about your thesis. What do you think you want to say in the paper? Like, what's the point? And this, do not overthink it. I really ask students, like, well, what are you trying to say? And then they say it, and that's your thesis. Like, it doesn't have to be complex or fancy, especially right now when we're just getting our ideas on the paper. Don't overthink the word choice or the syntax or anything like that. Just get your ideas down. And then think about your idea expressed and like where you want to go with it, how you want to develop it. And don't worry about necessarily these as body paragraphs, but perhaps just like, oh, I'm going to talk about this first, and then this, and then this, and then this. This is just to give you a rough outline before we go to a more formal outline with our paper. And then after you've done that, you might want to go back and think about the syntax, think about the word choice when you revise your thesis statement. So hopefully this will help you really focus your paper and think about, what am I trying to say? What point do I want to get across to my readers?